Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me again this week is Capping with Candace. Candace here. And Candace, back when we started in January, we were talking about horses like Scotland and Our Pretty Boy Floyd and horses like that. And we're finally here for the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby. And first off, let's start with the Kentucky Oaks. I think the pace of the race is going to be very important for the Oaks.
Definitely. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to be pretty quick. I think you seem to agree based off conversations that we've had. There's a lot of horses in here who've won in wire-to-wire fashion. We do have a heavy favorite in this race. I think most people know Untappable. She can rate though, so she won't be up on the lead. I wouldn't expect, and I mean she's definitely a deserving favorite. I think she's going to be mighty tough in this race. I'm not going to bet this race, very hard because I think she has a really great chance of winning and she will be incredibly low odds. But, for me, the horses I'm looking at are ones coming up from off the pace. So I quite like Aurelia's Bell. She ran a few times at Gulfstream, lost to Only For You, who, unfortunately has passed since then. But I just think she had trouble with her running style down at Gulfstream. I think one of her runs was on the day of the Fountain of Youth when the track was really biased, and I just think that track really didn't suit her running style. And then she went to Turfway Park and, really impressed coming from behind there to get the victory. And she just strikes me as a horse who's getting good at the right time. And being by Lemon Drop Kid, I just really think that the distance suits her. She wants to go further. She's 50 to 1 morning line. She will not be there. She'll absolutely come down. But I think she is the value in this race. So she's kind of my official pick here, though I will also say on my tickets I will have Rhea Antonia, if you remember her from the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies race. She finished second and then got DQ'd up to first after Tiger was qualified there. And she's another one who will be coming from off the pace. Of course, she's with Bob Baffert now after the trainer switch a few races back, and so she's also one I'm looking at. But my official pick will be Aurelia's Bell.
For me, I have been analyzing the pace of this race, and I'm about as sure of a pace meltdown as I can be. The form on the Derby horses didn't hold up quite as well. A lot of the horses that won races are hurt and not running in the Derby. But when you look at the Oaks field, every single horse that won a major race on the Oaks Trail is in this field. You have My Miss Sophia, who won the Gazelle. You have Fashion Plate, who won the Santa Anita Oaks. You have the winner of the Bourbonnette. You have the winner of the Ashland, the Dead Heat winner, Rosalyn. And you also have the My Miss Sophia, the winner from the East Coast. So you have roughly 6 horses coming in with wins, which is unusual. And then you also have 3 horses that ran second to those winners, all making this race. So a very competitive race. And as I mentioned, I'm pretty confident in a speed duel here. With that in mind, I think Fashion Plate, who was impressive in a couple of wins out west at Santa Anita, this is the type of horse that, I think in a legitimate, honest pace duel with some other horses up front, this is the type of horse that could run, 10, 15 lengths behind. Once she gets headed and gets pressured, she could just pack it up pretty early. Another horse that I'm a little bit dubious of is My Miss Sophia. I thought she ran a really good race last week, the last time she ran, but I also thought she ran a real hard race, harder than people think. Those fractions that day running into that wind was pretty tough. And so I think she's a candidate to maybe regress a little bit, because I'm always a little skeptical of horses that go 5.5 furlongs in their first race, and then all of a sudden they're running 9 furlongs in their third lifetime race. That's a pretty big jump up and pretty demanding. So there's another horse that I think may regress a little bit. I'm officially picking Aurelia's Bell. Lemon Drop kids start to get good around this time. Really, when they develop anything before March of their 3-year-old season. And she's ran good on dirt races. She chased the bias against Gulfstream, ran on the Poly, and I'm a firm believer in what I call the Poly to dirt bump, where horses tend to improve about 2-3 speed points going from Poly to dirt. And I really like the last race where she just sat in the pocket, rated, and made a nice move. Another horse who I think is going to improve this time is Got Lucky. Chased, I think she was forced to make an early move in that last race against My Miss Sophia. She kind of made the move around the same time that Sweet Reason did, and I think she really wanted to lay back. She ran second to Untappable, so I'm expecting a big run from Got Lucky in this race. And what is your thoughts on Rosalyn? She's another horse coming out of Keeneland and going back to the dirt.
She's a horse who I've actually quite liked. I played her on that day at Keeneland. I do think that she's better on the synthetic, but she does have the running style to make it happen here. I'm just maybe a little concerned that, you know, she's such a deep closer that maybe a few of the others are going to get the first jump on her. But, you know, if the pace does melt down like you think it will, definitely has a chance, but you know, I'm maybe siding with Aurelius Bell and Ria Antonia just because I think they're going to get the first jump on her.
I do want to talk about Untappable a little bit, mainly because, you know, usually there's three kinds of favorites. You have your legitimate favorites, you have your vulnerable favorites, and then kind of have your false favorites. And I do believe Untappable is the legitimate favorite here. There's nothing in her pedigree that says she can't get 9 furlongs. She's dominated in both her wins. She's made wide sweeping runs. She does, I mean, she's, as a 2-year-old, she raced inside horses. So it's not like she's never raced inside a horse or not been forced to the lead early. She's very trackable speed. The one thing is she did face 2 small fields in her big wins this year. That worries me a little bit. And her first race back, which at the time looked like it was going to be a solid field of horses, it just ended up being a bunch of no-shows. And I really think that win visually wasn't as good as the last win. I was very impressed visually and by the numbers and everything on that last win. So I'm just wondering if she's been toughened up enough this year. And then a horse that I was really high on, I drafted in my fantasy racing league as with my second pick, was Unbridled Forever. And this horse lost to Untappable the last time, but she's a smaller filly. She needs to really eat her Wheaties and eat her nut bars because she needs to pack on some weight a little bit. But I do think if she is going to run her best race, I think a full field, a strong pace, and her best and most fast race was at Churchill Downs as a 2-year-old. And, you know, it's kind of fun, but it was legitimate. I mean, she's got the pedigree. Her mother won the Kentucky Oaks as a long shot the same year that Barbaro won. So she's got a little bit of lemon drop kid pedigree in her, and I think Unbridled Forever is a legitimate play. But I'm just a little worried, you know, that last race, Untappable just handled her so easily in that race.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, too. I know one horse who a lot of people on Twitter seem to be gravitating towards is Sugar Shock, who won last time out. Do you see her as a pace casualty, or do you think she can lay off the front-end speed?
I think Sugar Shock, of the 3 speed horses, I have 2 need-to-lead types. I think Fashion Plate only has one way to race. If she does not get to the lead, I think Fashion Plate cannot come from behind. I think My Miss Sophia wants the lead. I think she'll be close to the lead. I just think My Miss Sophia might be a fast horse, so I think she's going to be on the lead. Sugar Shock, of those 3, I think could maybe lay a little bit back. But she's another horse who, from January, I mean, she's just bumped it up the last 2 races, where I think she's just legitimately getting so good right now that she is going to run a 47 and change, and that's going to put her right up there. And of the 3 speedballs, I think she could maybe hang on the most. And the Candy Ride breeding I like. So I think she, of the 3 horses, has the best chance of laying off the pace. But I think she's just so good right now. She may just be sharp, and they may just... Calvin Burrell, you know, he lives for days like this. He's not getting the wins the rest of the year. So when he's got 100,000 fans watching him, I think he rides his best races.
Yep.
So officially, your top pick or top 2 picks, or who you're going to be using in doubles and pick 3s?
My official pick is Aurelius Bell. In my plays, I'll be going 2 deep with Aurelius Bell and Ria Antonia.
Sounds great. My top 3 is Aurelius Bell, and I'll also be using Rosalind and Untappable, and then I also will be using a little bit of Got Lucky in my doubles and pick 3s with the Oaks Derby Day. So that's the Kentucky Oaks. I'm looking for, it looks like the weather's going to be nice. Now the Derby. This is what everybody's been waiting for. We've been talking about the contenders since November, and then we transitioned into January. And, you know, this year there was probably a higher injury rate than normal. The attrition rate especially kind of hit late, which is a little bit unusual this year. Normally you have just as many injuries, but they're kind of happening in January and February. And this year it seemed like a lot of the injuries happened after horses had won races. And then when you have a crop of tappets and every one of them is breaking down, it seems like, out of a workout every other day, it's kind of been a rough road here. But overall, give me your thoughts on this field. I mean, a lot of people say, like, oh, they didn't beat anybody, or it's a bad crop. Just a quick synopsis. I mean, I think it's a good crop.
Yeah, I mean, everybody says that every single year, that this is a terrible group of horses, they haven't beat anything. You know what, I like this group. I think it's so different than what we've seen in recent years. Do we have all of the, fancy-smancy pedigrees that maybe you like to dissect? Probably not, but we have some gritty horses who, you know what, they just go out there and they flat out win races. And I have a lot of respect for that. It makes it a really fun race.
Pace of this race, I am still 50-50. Somebody mentioned a stat that 4 of the fractions over the last 13 years have been 109 and change. I'm just not seeing that this year. So I think it's 50% chance of a fast pace and 50% chance of a moderate pace, but maybe a little contentious.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like everybody is still saying pace meltdown, and even more so after the draw, because you had Vickers in trouble, draw the rail, who they're like, oh, well, they're sending him now. Well, I think they were going to anyway. Like, he's a horse who legitimately runs his best races when he's on the lead. So I don't think that really changed anything, actually. I kind of side with you. I think it's going to be a contentious pace. It always is in the Derby, and they're not by any means going to go slow. But I just don't see this pace meltdown. I mean, other than Vickers in trouble, who I think clearly will be on the lead so long as he breaks well, I just kind of don't see who else is going to be up there with him. I honestly think that Wildcat Red will try to rate from the 10 post, and he's done that before. It's not like that's not possible. So who else do you have who's going to be on the lead? I mean, I guess people are pointing to Uncle Si with first-time blinkers, but from everything I've heard and everything I've seen in workouts, the plan is definitely to rate him. So if he ended up on the lead, it would be because something didn't go according to plan.
Well, let's talk about a few of the contenders. Right away, let's start with California Chrome. Obviously the favorite. On paper, he's done nothing wrong. I think the only real thing on paper that nobody really kind of nitpicks at is the Lucky Pulpit California bred. But at this time, that's irrelevant. I mean, he's won 4 straight races. He's ran the fastest. He ships in from out west. I guess the only thing intriguing is they opted to ship him late, and he's never had an official workout over Churchill Downs. California Chrome's chances, and does that mean anything not working out over the surface?
To me, it doesn't mean a lot. I think that sometimes, it can be a little bit overrated, the surface switch. I mean, he is going from dirt to dirt, and yeah, there's a difference, but to me, the good horses can handle the surface switch, so I don't see that as being, a big, big problem. Maybe it's a little more overrated than it really is. The late ship, maybe it's a little more concerning to me than that, just because, I would rather him come in and really get acclimated, because this is a different race and a different atmosphere than probably anything he'll ever experience in his life. I will say that, maybe I'm overthinking it a little, but I do think that if you're planning on betting against him, that this draw was kind of ideal. He has Danza to his inside, Samra to his outside. Both of them break really well, and you have to think will be forwardly placed in mid-pack, which will force him up there. So if he doesn't break well, which he's done before, he's definitely going to be in big trouble with those two on either side of him. With Vickers in trouble to his inside, I just think he could really easily end up in traffic, caught on the inside behind horses, and it's not to say he can't win out of that. It's just I don't think that's ideal for him. His big wins have come when he's been on the outside in the clear. So, he's kind of in a situation where, to me, it's like, well, if you're good enough, show us how good you are, because I don't think this is ideal for him at all.
When I look back at the 2014 Derby Trail, the one thing, no matter who wins on Saturday, I've already kind of put it in my head that the 4 horses that I'm going to remember are Uncle Si and Samrat, the New York Brawlers, and the Florida Gang in General A-Rod and Wildcat Red. I just have the utmost respect. because while the rest of these horses, with all the fancy trainers and all the fancy pedigrees and all the $1 million yearlings, these four guys just kept on working out, kept on going to the track. The trainers kept on saying what next race they're going to run in, and they exactly ran in those races, and they have not had to scratch their plans. And Samrat's got frequent flyer miles shipping back and forth from New York and running in New York when it was 30-degree wind chills and things like that. So those are the four guys that I'm going to remember. And I really want to talk about Uncle Si and Sammy. I think that one of these two is going to run big, and maybe both of them. They're two of the top horses in my top 5. Uncle Si gets the blinkers. The last race, he broke a step slow and kind of got out of his element in the Wood Memorial. And then, you know, you could kind of tell he was unfocused because he was on the outside and kind of sitting behind a pack of horses. And he kind of was just lollygagging around, and then he kind of made up a few lengths on the turn. And then he kind of galloped out nice, like he didn't really seem to mind going the distance. And then Samrat, I mean, what can you say about this guy? I mean, wins his first 5 races. Then the last race, I mean, he was beaten twice. There was twice halfway down the stretch and approaching the 8th pole that there was not one handicapper in the country that thought this horse was going to get in 2nd place. And by God, you know, he just dug that nose down and inched social inclusion out at the wire. And I like a horse like that. I just have a feeling, you know, he keeps on working out well. He seems to hold his flesh. Again, they both outrun their pedigrees. I think one of these two is going to run big, and I'm including both of them in doubles and pick 3s just because I have to.
I completely agree. These are my top 2 picks in this race. Uncle Si, I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone on Twitter. He would be my top choice here. I mean, I already liked him before the Wood. He was my pick in the Wood, but I love how he ran in that race. Yes, he broke a step slow. He had an incredibly wide trip. People, you know, I think people forget after that race, all the talk was, wow, social inclusion went so wide. And I think he went 20-some odd feet further than Wicked Strong. Well, Uncle Si went double that much further than Wicked Strong. So, you know, he had a very wide trip. I agree. He looked unfocused. He was looking to the outside a lot during that race. But he finished with interest, which makes me think that this distance is not a concern. Even though everyone wants to peg him as one that he can't get the distance, I don't see it coming off of that race. So he's definitely my top pick. Yes, he's first-time blinkers. No, I don't expect him to run out like Powell Smallis. I don't really understand how everyone's equating just because that happened last year that's going to happen this year. There's been 2 works. If you look at the New York Racing Association YouTube page, his 2 most recent works are on there. He's wearing blinkers in both of them, and I thought he looked fantastic, particularly his work 2 back in company. They had him starting off in company behind a horse and then, you know, raiding off of him, then coming up on him and making him move along the rail. And he might very well have to do that here, and I thought he looked really good doing that in the work. So he's definitely my top pick. I don't see him going to the lead. I expect him to sit, you know, hopefully on the rail behind Vickers and Trouble. That's kind of where I see him going if all things go well. And so he's my top pick here. As far as Samrat goes, you know, you kind of said it all, but I don't think there's a grittier horse in this field. He just knows how to win, and there's so many races where everyone picks against him because, you know, I feel like way back when he was running, trying, you know, 2 turns for the first time, we said there's no way he should be able to run this far, and yet he kept winning races, and, you know, even in the Wood, like I said, he was just so game to finish where he did in 2nd. So, yeah, I mean, I think because I like Uncle Si as much as I do, I feel compelled to include Samrat because their form is so tied together. So that's kind of where I'm looking. Those are absolutely my first 2.
A horse that I wanted to mention just because I every once in a while, you know, when a horse regresses in their prep right before the Derby, that's normally not a good sign. And I just think that Arkansas Derby, there's just something I haven't liked since that race. I didn't like it that day. Tapiture is better than that race. I'm sorry. They switched jockeys. They laid back. They made a sweeping wide move. They're going to quit gaming around. This horse is as game as they come. He ran 6 straight good races. He had 1 bad race because they made a bad move to go to a quote-unquote better jockey. They took him out of his element. And I think his best race was at Churchill Downs last fall. I think he cycled into it. And the other day when they ran him in a rainstorm, this guy is not a Tappet. And I think he's going to run a good race. I think he's going to be up there freewheeling. I think they have nothing to lose. I think everybody's given up on him. And on the turn, you're going to see this bay colt by Tappet just out there doing what he does. And can he go 10 furlongs? Ultimately, I'm not picking him, so maybe not. But I'm tossing that last race, and there's just no way he's 6-7 lengths worse than Danza. Danza, if the Derby was a 7-horse field and it was him, Danza, Ride on Curlin, I mean, don't tell me that Tapiture would not be 6-5 in that race. He just would be.
Yeah, this guy was the hardest one for me to toss. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to play 4 horses from this race, and if I had like an also eligible, next first one out, it would be Tapiture. I really, really liked him in the Rebel. His race before that was fantastic. His race in the Rebel just blew my mind. I mean, he basically became my #1 horse after the Rebel, and I just did not know what I saw in the Arkansas Derby. I just think it was almost a complete no-show there. And, I mean, I really want to forgive him. I really like him, and I think, unlike so many of the Tappets, I do think he mentally is sound enough to win this race. I just can't get over that last performance, and I really want to because I do like him, but he's the first one I'm leaving off, so if he beats me, that's going to be tough because, I liked him for a while there, but I have to let him go. I'm inclined to think this is too far.
My official top pick, I've been debating for about a week now. I've had it down to the 2 New York Brawlers, and I just, in the back of my mind, there's been one race on this whole Derby trail that I keep on going back to, and it's the Cash Call. And a couple of things, it's irrelevant anymore, but I'll tell you right now, Shared Belief was the best horse in this crop, period. I have been watching horse racing for 15 to 20 years. He was the dominant juvenile. He was the 2-year-old champion. He was the best horse on January 1st. With that being said, all I remember is this big blur of brown by Candy Ride making a huge move from 10th place up to the lead with the Hall of Famer in him, Gary Stevens. And in the last 15 years, there's been about 5 Derby moves. Street Sense made the move. Fusiachi Pegasus made the move. Sunday Silence made the move. And darn it, I'm going with Candy Boy to make the move. I just think that whether it's a fast pace, a slow pace, if you really look at it, his best maiden win, he came from 6 lengths off the pace. Then in that Cash Call, he was in 10th place, and then he took the lead. And what really impressed me about that, Shared Belief just knocked his socks off. And any other 2-year-old in the country would have finished 10th that day. They'd have got winded by Shared Belief, and they would have just started doing the moonwalk. I see it happen every day, all the time. And that horse just kept on plodding along, and he held second easily by 2-3 lengths, and he galloped out good. And he galloped out good the last race. California Chrome ran the race of his life. I just think they miscalculated. I think they thought 65 days off was a good deal, and it wasn't. We saw that that was a failure for everybody. Cairo Prince and all these horses that took 60 days off. So I just have to go with Candy Boy, and I just think that in a race full of clowns, I have to go with Gary Stevens on Candy Boy.
I already said it, but my official pick is Uncle Si. I just think if you look at him just on paper, maybe it's tough to see, but if you watch his races, the talent is there. I think he's getting better and better. It might not be his best finish, but I definitely think his best race was in the Wood. Blinkers can help, and I think they will help. At least from what I've seen in the works, he looks so much more focused and relaxed. So my official pick is Uncle Si, but I will say, like I said, I'm going 4 deep here. So the horses I plan on using are Uncle Si, Samra, Dance with Fate, and Metal Count. So 2 horses who I think are going to be, off the pace but forwardly placed in case the pace isn't crazy. Like I don't think either you and I will be. But if something ridiculous happens, I do have Metal Count and Dance with Fate to come from further back. So that's kind of how I'm thinking.
You had a chance to see both Metal Count and Dance with Fate on your worldwide tour, and then you also saw Shitu back down in Sunland, crazy old Sunland.
Yes, I did see all of them. I will confirm everybody seems to love Dance with Fate, and I will say that down at Keeneland, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more handsome horse than Dance with Fate, and I saw Wise Dan and all those crew. but Dance with Fate really stood out looks-wise, and I'm not worried about Dance with Fate or Medal Count transitioning to the dirt. Both of them, I think, have won credibly in their dirt starts. Dance with Fate, of course, finished second in the front runner. That's on dirt, and he had a wide trip there back at Santa Anita. And his Breeders' Cup Juvenile, his race was much better than the results show. He had an absolutely horrible trip in that race. In Medal Count, we talked about him, well, I talked about him quite a bit after he ran in the Fountain of Youth. I thought, to me, he was actually the one who stood out to me in that race. I'll quickly go over. He was in the second flight behind General A-Rod and Wildcat Red alongside Commissioner. And if you remember that race, going into the far turn, anybody and everybody who was anywhere near Medal Count was just dropping to the back like they, ran to a brick wall. And for him to at least stay on really caught my eye. So people want to knock these to a synthetic specialist, and they might be, ultimately be better on the turf than synthetic, but I'm not going to say either of them can't run a credible race on the dirt.
One of the things I told you back in January when Opportunity Knocks bet on it, and this horse I did want to mention, the pedigree's always been there. I had him in my stable mail, and I kept on tweeting out that he was working out, and I think he thought I was just kind of fooling around, and no, I had actually studied his pedigree, and then he, I picked him in the Risen Star, and he lost by 7 lengths, and then he came back and won the Rebel, and got second in the Santa Anita Derby. I guess my thought process with him is I still think he has a pedigree. The Curse of Apollo, I'm a big believer that you have to run as a 2-year-old, so that's why I'm not putting him in as a win guy, but he looks like a router. Visually, it doesn't seem to have taken a toll on him 5 races this year, so I do expect a good race, but I guess my thought process is if I could bet on California Chrome at 7-2 or 4-1, why would I bet on Opportunity at 7-1? So I guess I'd rather take 4-1 on California Chrome, who dusted him the last race and has 3 other good races. Opportunity, and then quick mention, Wicked Strong. I guess one thing I'm not playing him. I guess that's the only horse that the post position I thought was affected by. And truth in lending disclosure, I have a future bet on Wicked Strong at 150 to 1 way back from November. So I kind of am just, if he wins, I win my, I get 150 to 1, and I have $10 to win and a couple field exacta bets with him over some other horses. So I guess I've kind of got him covered, but I'm leaning him as more of a 2nd, 3rd, 4th place horse because I really do think the 20th post position. Plus with Wicked Strong, even though I like that last race, he seems like, as Sig Mendoza would call him, he's a grinder.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that burst of speed.
Right. That was what turned me off. I mean, there's a few things. I know people loved him from the Remsen, but he couldn't run in a straight line there, and he couldn't run a straight line still in the wood. I don't know if he's still shying from the stick or if it's just him, but I completely agree. When I watched the wood replay, that was the first thing I saw is, these were tired horses. I mean, this was Social Inclusion, Samrot. These were a bunch of horses who, were up on. I mean, I know the race held together, but it was a pretty quick pace, and so they were all pretty gassed. And he didn't fly by. He wasn't like. I felt like when I saw Dance with Fate win the Bluegrass, that he really, took it to them, took that lead, grabbed it, and when Dance with Fate took the lead there, he put his head down and he found another gear. And I didn't really see that from Wicked Strong. He just kind of was grinding down tired horses, which is good, and I think can get him, a place in this race. But ultimately, they're not all going to be tired. Someone's going to be coming, so you have to kind of have that ability to make, I guess as we said, like a winning move. And I'm not sure he has that. As far as Opportunity goes, he's another one who's been kind of hard for me to drop off. I don't really know how to feel about him. If he wins this race, I won't be incredibly surprised because, like you said, distance should not be a concern for him, which is, definitely not the case for most of this field. And he looks like a router. But it's hard for me to gauge how good he really is. I think, he beat the crew up in Arkansas on the wet track, which I think we all kind of agree he really liked that wet track. But, I don't know, I'm kind of just taken back how that group got so dusted by Danza that it makes me think, well, how good were they really? So then how good is really Opportunity? And then everyone made a big deal about him, he just ran paid workout behind California Chrome, but I don't think California Chrome was pushed all that hard in that race either. So I don't kind of get the appeal there. That's like, oh, he wasn't trying, but he finished, second behind California Chrome by open length. Well, if California Chrome wasn't really trying, then I don't get why I would take him at, what he's going to be like, maybe 8-1 or 6-1. I kind of agree that, at that point, where's the value? California Chrome might be the value at that point.
Well, I know there's another horse. There's an interesting story, and it's Bronco Billy and the Pride of Ellis Park. What can you tell me about? I know we've got a few fans that are big fans of this guy.
Oh, they don't want to hear what I have to say about him. They got mad last time.
Uh-oh. Yeah, you threw him in the dumpster, I think, last week.
I kind of don't see the appeal. He ran a couple good races as a 2-year-old. He ran in the Champagne. I still say the Champagne was his best race he's ever ran, and that was not a long time ago. That was back when we still had Honor Code and Havana on the trail. So, it's hard. I mean, at this point, 2-year-old form is kind of irrelevant, and I think his best races were as a 2-year-old. And I just think this year he's one of these, like, he just runs around, and, when the horses get tired, he passes them, and he just does his thing. So he got enough points to get here, but he hasn't won all year. He hasn't done anything to show me he's going to win all year. I honestly just think he's kind of slow, and
that could be relevant.
But he's able to pick up the pieces because he does have the pedigree. He's going to stay. He just isn't super fast. But I will say, for me, the biggest turnoff for him, and I have mentioned this on Twitter, was in the Rebel. He got the lead. He had the lead to himself, and he got passed. And he didn't even get second there. And that, to me, is just always a turnoff. I never want to see a horse, he just didn't even really fight for it. It just made me just think he's kind of soft. And that's not going to win you the Kentucky Derby by any means, especially against some of these. I mean, you think if Samrad has the lead with the furlong to go, he's not going to fight to the death for it? That's the horse I want. I don't want the horse who's just going to let everyone fly by and not even, really, have the grit to really go for it. And I don't think Right on Curlin is that type of horse.
Yeah, and Uncle Si with those big wounded warrior blinker warrior mask, he ain't going to give up without a fight. Now, another horse that, one of the stats in the Derby is that, I mentioned this several times, is that in the last 14 years, we've only had about 2 Derbies that were close. Most of the time, at the 8th pole, the winner's there. Half the field is doing the moonwalk. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons every time I think of Intense Holiday, I think of him just winning in one final stride.
Yeah.
And I just can't play a horse that I think he got lucky one time and won in the final stride.
Yeah. Well, in his last race, in the Louisiana Derby, I mean, people are giving him all the excuses in the world. I don't think he looked good in that race at all. And, I mean, I get that he raced a little more forwardly than he typically would. But, I mean, I can't emphasize how slow Vickers in Trouble came for the last, last eighth of a mile for that last furlong. And Intense Holiday did nothing. I mean, at least, for people who like Commanding Curve, he was flying in. And, did he look a lot better than he did because of that pace coming home? Probably. But at least he was closing. Intense Holiday wasn't even really closing. He ran along the rail the whole way. Maybe he just didn't like that, but he was able to save ground. He just looked tired. And I don't see the appeal in Intense Holiday at all here. I get that he's going to be up from off the pace, so if you think it's going to be fast, you're thinking, well, I'll take a horse coming from the back, but I think there's a host of other closers that are better than him.
So my final thoughts on how I think the race is maybe going to be run is, I think for some odd reason, California Chrome is going to be taken back, and I'm hoping that the track is a little bit dull and slow and cold, and I want some of the weather conditions to come into play. I'm expecting a moderate pace, but contentious pace. And I really think Vickers in Trouble is capable of leading this field at the 7 furlong mark. I think Tapiture, Samrat, and Uncle Si are going to be right behind him. Mm-hmm. I would love to see Uncle Si or Samrat just run a monster race. If they don't, I think Candy Boy, whether it's fast, slow, medium pace, I just think he's one of the few horses with a legitimate jockey who's ran behind horses, who has a pedigree, who looks like a router, and has some 6 furlong stamina workouts built into him, that if it comes down to just who can survive, Candy Boy is my survivor. I love the odds on Uncle Si and Samrat, and I just think they're game. If it's a dog fight, I want those two. And Candace says Ride on Curlin's way too slow. How do you see the race?
Before I say that, I forgot I wanted to ask you one question, because you're a pedigree guy. Is one reason that I have medal count underneath is because, at least in my very elementary pedigree analysis, I think he's one who actually is bred for this distance. Would you agree with that?
Yes, a medal count definitely has the pedigree for 10 furlongs, but he's kind of like Wicked Strong to me. Is that he doesn't seem to have that move, and it's his 3rd race in 27 days. And that, I mean, he ran 31 more feet than Dance with Fate, and so he ran a lot the last race. Now, the race before, he had the rail all the way around, so it's kind of interesting. He went from the rail trip on the Transylvania washed off the turf, and I don't know, I mean, that'd be another heck of a story. I mean, this horse was on nobody's radar 27 days ago, and now he's probably going to be top 5 or 6 in the betting. I will add that Dale Roman somehow wins races with the most impossible horses the last few years on Churchill Downs Day.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say about medal count is, for me, the one thing I was concerned about is how much he has run. But at the very least, from at least people I trust who are on the ground, they say he's looked good, flesh and coat, which is what mattered to me the most with him. I think he's kind of one of these. He's known to be a really good workhorse. I just think he's one of these who he kind of thrives on running, and so I think he'll be okay. Quick things we didn't get to talk about it much. My other pick is Dance with Fate. I mentioned him in the Bluegrass, but I will say the main reason why I like him is, for one, I know you mentioned him on Twitter as one who they had a plan and they stuck to it, and there hasn't been any deviations from that. No injuries, no time off, nothing like that. And I will say him and Tapiture are the two, and California Chrome, I suppose, are the 3 horses in here who I really think I could see visually a progression with them throughout the year. Especially Dance with Fate. He was a horse who, in some of his previous runs, had a tendency to kind of idle when he got the lead. There was a number of races where he got the lead and he lost it late to Tamorando. And so that's why I emphasize so much his finish in the Bluegrass, because I really think that was a progression from what we had seen from him in the past. I'll also say that, his juvenile form down at Del Mar was nice, but there's been a lot of races where he had trip trouble. So, he's one who you kind of have to dig a little to see how good he really ran in some of these races. But as far as how I view this race going, I agree. It's going to be, it's always a healthy pace in the Derby. They're not going to go slow, but it will be contentious up front. I do see Vickers in Trouble being your leader, but I don't see, everyone's acting like Vickers, Harry, Uncle, Wildcat Red, like they're all going to go to the lead. I don't see that. I kind of see Vickers in Trouble being up front with a host of others behind him. Uncle Si, Samrat, General A-Rod, Wildcat Red, Chitu. Maybe that's kind of the group I'd expect to be, right behind him, just, ensuring an honest pace up there. My official top pick is Uncle Si. I would love, if the rail isn't dead, I would love for him to be able to sit along the rail, just behind, Vickers in Trouble and that crew. But he is one that, watch closely throughout the day, because if the rail is dead, as much as I love him, even I can't play him then, because he's going to be over there somewhere. So, maybe more so than some of the others, you're going to have to keep an eye on the track who's playing before you play Uncle Si. So, official topic, Uncle Si. We'll also be playing Samrat, Dance with Fate, and Medal Count.
And if this Derby was run on paper only and there was never any injuries in a virtual world, it would be a dead heat for me between Shared Belief and Chelios. We need those guys to get back on the track, but it isn't the way it worked out, and there's a lot of horses that went by the wayside.
What? Yeah, Chelios is back. We just saw him a couple weeks ago.
So now, they have the Oaks Derby doubles. Give me a couple of those, and then an Oaks Derby. I know you've got a horse that you think some people may want to throw into their Oaks Derby Woodford pick 3.
Okay, Oaks Derby doubles. Well, I'll tell you what mine will be. It'll be Aurelia's Belle and Ria Antonia with Uncle Si Samra, Dance with Fate, and Medal Count. So that'll be mine for that. For the Oaks Woodford Reserve Derby pick 3, and it'll be those same horses for the Oaks and the Derby. And then for the Woodford Reserve, I plan on playing Kai Gun. He's a horse who I've followed all throughout the year. He's mostly been down at Gulfstream. If you watch the Maker's Mile, he finished second to Wise Dan in a race that pretty much all fell apart in front of him. He broke a step slow there, so he got pretty far behind early, but madness ensued in front of him, so he was able to close to second. But he is a nice horse. He won an allowance optional claiming down at Gulfstream ahead of Hey Leroy, who we've seen come back since then to win an allowance and to win a stakes race. So, is he up to Wise Dan level? Probably not. But Wise Dan is breaking from the rail, and maybe more importantly, is the horse next to him, I think, will be the lone speed in that race. So, he could get a little bit boxed in. I mean, it seems like in some of his races, lately, other jocks are really taking it to him, kind of like what we've seen with Game On Dude. So, if he gets a little bit of trip trouble or something happens, I think Kai Gun could be the horse to really take advantage. All in all, Wise Dan should absolutely win the race, but, I think he's the one who has the biggest chance if something goes wrong with Wise Dan.
For my Oaks Derby doubles, I'm definitely going to go with Aurelia's Belle. I'm going to go with Got Lucky, Untappable, and Rosalyn, and then I'm going to come back with just the 3. I learned a few years back that you just go with 2 or 3 horses and live with it, and so I'm going to go Candy Boy, Uncle Si, Samrat, and I'll do a couple of pick 3s. I'll throw Wise Dan and Kai Gun and maybe pick a third, but I'm leaning just those 2 right now. I don't see a lot of value in that. But again, my best bet is going to be the double starting with the Derby on Derby Day and go 3 there deep and then try to go 5 deep in the race after that and then close it out with a pick 3 starting on the Derby on Derby Day. So next week we'll recap both the Oaks and the Derby, and we'll talk about the trips and how the pace played out, and hopefully we'll see how everybody did. The reaction to this year's winner, California Chrome, the big favorite, going in to the Derby 140. That's going to do it, and thanks again for joining us on Down to the Wire.